welcome everyone. I'd like to begin by saying it's an honor to have both of you here today. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and this is an important event. Let me begin by introducing Cynthia Rosenzweig. She is she represents the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Study, connected to Columbia University. Shagun Mehrotra, also representing Columbia University. And both of them have participated in this book that they'll be talking about later, Climate Change and Cities, along with 150 other contributors? 106. Okay, well, imagine the logistical nightmare of 106 people coming together and writing a book. Well, okay. And right now I will let our guests talk about what they've done.
Last year and a half has been exhausting because we have gone and met many policymakers in many forums and many groups of researchers talking about how to articulate the state of the knowledge on climate change so that better choices can be made by cities as they respond to climate change, or even as they do routine tasks in cities, because as time goes on, the risk gets increasingly embedded in city choices. And we came together as the Urban Climate Change Research Network, UCCRN, some people call it UCERN now, but it's essentially an open group of researchers represented in about 50 cities around the world. And what I present to you here today is the effort of over 100 scholars, which has come together in our forthcoming book called Climate Change and Cities, which is really targeted at mayors and their policymakers so that they can do little more than what they are already doing, like the case of New York or the case of Mexico City, that is grounded in more science. I will try to quickly walk you through what we had put together for mayors last year when they met in Copenhagen, and what we have been presenting to them subsequently. And we have 4 of our colleagues who are editors in this. Cynthia is here, but we also have Professor Bill Solecki, who is based in New York at the City University of New York, and collaborates with Cynthia on the work that you saw for Mayor Bloomberg's panel on climate change, the New York panel on climate change. We have also a colleague who works on energy systems, Professor Steve Hammer. He presently is involved in training 300 mayors on energy efficiency issues in China. It's a very important piece of work. And there's me. We are the 4 editors. And there are 106 authors together that have put this work over the last year and a half. I'll try to briefly go through the rationale and the content and then open it up for further discussion. But essentially, the state of the knowledge that exists on climate change has been focused on nation states and has been dominated by sectoral focuses, geographic focuses, but not specifically focused on cities. And that was a knowledge gap that our efforts tried to address. But cities are special not only because they are on coastal areas, they have special climate phenomena like the heat island effect, but more than that, that cities have been the primary actors, as we have seen over the last 2 years. And in some cases over the last 5 years, that cities have been acting as the climate negotiations continue. And while we hope that we'll come in Cancun with a negotiated agreement for action, the hopes as we talk to our colleagues who are involved in this process are slim. In the meanwhile, cities have been acting, and the body of knowledge that exists is really focused. The unit of analysis in the body of knowledge that exists is nation-state oriented. And cities need more specialized attention, and our efforts brings that climate science for cities. There is a group of the world's 40 largest cities that are committed to climate change, and that includes New York and Mexico City, Sao Paulo, Toronto. Joburg and many others. And when they met in New York, the UCCRN group was involved in a special event where this work grew out from. And this was in 2008. Between then and now, an idea has taken form into a complete product, but we hope to take this further in the form of a programmatic approach that not only stops at producing the knowledge but as a book, but also takes it to the policymakers and works with them to implement this in their cities. This is an important slide. I'll focus a little on this and then quickly run through the rest. But this provides the structure of how we have approached this issue. And like Cynthia presented in the case of New York, climate science is very important to understand what impacts a city is going to, can potentially experience, and therefore prepare for a response. So our book is organized in 3 sections, the first being the science around crafting the risk. And this involves climate projections, but also bringing 3 fundamental attributes together. And these 3 fundamental attributes bring 3 different communities together, essentially social scientists, policymakers, and natural scientists. Natural scientists provide us the science for projecting the climate. So some of those issues are discussed up here, but then cities operate through the issues that were mentioned earlier, silos of energy, transport, water, public health. These are departments within cities, and usually the transport department is not so concerned about other issues, and they tend to focus on their own sector, and that does pose coordination challenges. But first we need to address each sectoral issue, and so the book is organized by sectors so that each sector specialist can get their sectoral information articulated, and each part or each of these sectors is organized by climate risks, by adaptation, mitigation, policy options. And if you take away just one thing, there are 2 parts to responding to climate that were mentioned earlier, adaptation and mitigation, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, but also responding to the inevitable effects of climate change due to the existing pressures on the cities. To illustrate how these responses are occurring in different geographies around the world, different cities have different abilities, resources, commitments to doing these things, and have come up with innovative solutions. So these are illustrated through case studies that ground the experience of the general knowledge into specific locations. The case of Mexico City is in here as well, which has set up a special collaborative online system to link scientists with policymakers. And then is the most important issue of how these come together through a systemic approach, because the city doesn't work as a transport department wants it to, or an energy department wants it to. A city is an entity, and all these systems come together. And to understand how they interact, we have land use and governance that bring these issues together. On the risk framework, I just briefly want to articulate these 3 distinct attributes of risk. Cynthia explained the issue of probability times catastrophe times the probability of hazard occurring, the potential for damage. But here we bring 3 distinct communities together. And think of hazards being crafted by natural scientists that work on understanding how our environment works and modeling it and projecting it into the future, but also all the scientific effort over the last 100, 150 years where systematically documentation of climate variables has occurred, temperature, precipitation, sea level rise, and then millions of years of data that scientists are excavating through embedded ice and various other methods. But lots of the science informs how we can measure the potential for or the probability of hazards.